Two different wide angles at two different price points. So let's find out which lens is better for you. What's up y'all, it's Project Photography back with another video, and today we're going to be comparing these two lenses, the Nikon 14-30mm f4s to the 12-28 DX 3.5-5.6 PZVR. And both of these are incredible wide angle lenses in their own respects, but they are at two very different price points. We have the Nikon 14-30 coming in at $900 used on eBay, while this 12-28 is around $300 used on eBay. That is a massive price difference, and I think that these two lenses target two very different target demographics. So today I want to help you guys decide which lens will be better for you and your own use cases. And we definitely have to start out with the focal length. Now when we consider the 14-30 versus the 12-28, we have to take into account one thing. The 12-28 might seem wider because it is 12 millimeters, might seem 2 millimeters wider than the 14-30, but when we put this lens onto an APS-C size body, it turns into a 18-42. Now with this lens, you're only going to be able to use it on APS-C size bodies, mainly because that's what this lens is designed for. DX lenses are on crop sensor bodies, so you have to incur that 1.5 times crop, whereas this full frame 14-30 does not have to. So this means that the 14-30 is actually 4 millimeters wider than the 12-28. And even though 4 millimeters on the wide end might not seem like a big deal, it is absolutely a massive deal, especially with wide angle lenses. Now, with a 14-30, we're just going to be able to get more into the frame, create more complex compositions. We can exaggerate foreground elements even more, add more curvature into the frame. And me personally, I love the 14-30 focal length. And 18 millimeters is perfectly fine for a lot of photographers. If you're starting out, you really won't be able to tell a huge difference between a 14 and 18 millimeter. But I think 18 millimeters is going to be perfectly fine for a lot of different photographers. It will give you a slightly more compressed feel. You won't be able to get as much into the frame, and you aren't able to exaggerate those foreground elements as much. But when it comes to a wide angle lens, I really feel like you're gonna be able to capture quite a bit of different images with this lens. As long as the lens is wider than 20 millimeters on the wide angle side of things, it should be more than good enough for landscape photography. But here's an advantage that the 12-28 has over the 14-30. Because we're using, again, a crop sensor body on this lens, we're able to turn that 28 millimeter into an effective 42 millimeter. And that is 12 millimeters longer than the 14-30. Obviously, having more zoom is definitely going to be a huge advantage. We can just capture a few different compositions that we like, and I actually really like 42 millimeters on the 12-28. I really feel like you're going into more of a normal focal length, and that's definitely a different type of look when it comes to capturing landscape photography. But majority of the time, we're not going to be zooming anyways. When I'm shooting landscape photography with my wide angle lens, I'm going to be using the widest focal length possible. Having that 4 millimeters on the wide end with the 14-30 is a way bigger advantage over having more focal length on the long end. Of course, focal length is one aspect of getting a really nice wide angle lens, but you also have to consider image quality. And I think this is where the 12-28 really stands out to me. The 12-28 for $300 is actually an incredible lens when it comes to image quality. It's very sharp in the center. We get pretty decent corner sharpness, but that's one aspect that I was really surprised about. I didn't expect it to be as sharp as it is. And I think that's really important, especially coming from a budget lens like this that's supposed to be used on an APS-C size body. We are getting decent colors, are not as good as something like a 14-30, and the images will be a little bit flatter. But that's something you have to consider when getting the 12-28. Because you can only use it on an APS-C size body, there are going to be limitations when it comes to image quality versus going to something like a full frame 14-30. Because the 14-30 can use full frame sensors, we're going to get a wider array of different sensors that we can use that will have better image quality. But when we consider the 14-30 image quality by itself, it is a really sharp lens. This is an S-line lens, so it's just going to be that next tier above your regular Nikon Z lens. And with the 14-30, we're going to get better corner sharpness as well, really nice center sharpness, better colors overall. The images just have a different artistic style of feel, and it's just much more contrasty, much more punchy, and I really like that about the 14-30. Going on to now the build quality, I think that's another major aspect of these lenses. These two lenses are built very differently. If you take a look at the 14-30, this is going to be a mainly metal lens, and I really like that a lot. We have a metal mount, especially with a wide angle lens. You're going to be by the ocean mainly. You're going to be shooting a lot of different landscapes where the elements are going to come into play. And with a lens like the 14-30, because it's built better and has better weather sealing, you're gonna be able to withstand those elements a lot better and not have to worry about your camera gear getting damaged. But if you look over at the 12-28, this lens is going to be mainly plastic. Now, this may be good in some areas, like especially, for example, weight, but it's not going to be built nearly as well as the 14-30. This does have weather sealing though, so it is going to be able to protect against that elements, but relative to something like a 14-30, it's a question of, okay, but how much more durable is it going to be? Something else to note with the 14-30 is that the barrel will extend when you're zooming. Now, this could suck in a little bit more dust into the lens versus the 12-28 being a completely internal zoom, and having the power zoom here is really interesting because we get that internal zoom, but we also don't have to really worry about dust getting sucked into the lens, and I think that's a major component of why the 12-20 is so good. The weight and form factor is another major part of these lenses. Obviously, with the 12-20, it's going to be a lot smaller, more compact, so you're going to be able to fit it in your bag much more comfortably and be able to pack more stuff as a result. But with the 14-30, this is not a large lens at all. I mean, with the locking mechanism, it really shrinks it down so that you really don't have to worry about it taking up that much space. And for a full frame lens, this is plenty small. We are gonna get a difference in weight though. The 12-28 comes in at about 205 grams versus 485 grams with the 14-30. Now, that does seem like a pretty big difference on paper. And when you pick them up and hold them, the 12-20 is definitely a lot lighter. I think in the larger scope of bringing all that camera gear though, I don't know how much of a difference that's gonna make, but when you're traveling, let's just say if you're gonna be a lot smaller, bringing one camera, I think the 12-28 is definitely gonna have a major advantage over the 14-30. It's really a question of, do you want the 12-28's form factor being smaller, more lightweight, or do you like the larger size of the 14-30, but also having much more better weather sealing and better build quality overall? I don't necessarily think that there's a winner in this category, but for me personally, I like having the 14-30 because of that better build quality. But now we're gonna go into the last part and talk about who these lenses are for. And I really think a big part of this is the price point as well as what system you're using. For the most part, if you have an APS-C size system, the 12-28 is a no-brainer. It doesn't make sense to go with a 14-30 because it now turn this lens into a 21-45. At that point, you might as well just get the 12-28. But if you have a full frame system, this is obviously a no-brainer. You need to get the 14-30. This is meant for full frame. You're gonna get better image quality. Overall, I do like the 14-30 better. I mean, the main thing really is that focal length. 14 millimeters versus 18 millimeters is a massive difference, and I definitely prefer 14. And we are gonna get better image quality overall and better build quality. But for 3 times cheaper, the 12-28 does exist, and we are still going to get great image quality. And for such a budget lens, I was really surprised about that. It's gonna be smaller, more compact, and I think for a lot of photographers, you're gonna be pretty happy with the 12-28. And especially if you are on a budget and you want to save on money, I mean, why not go with something that is very good optically and will still capture amazing landscapes? Thank you guys so much for experiencing the world with me today. Please feel free to let me know which lens you would go with in the comment section down below. I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Thank you so much for watching. Please feel free to rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.